In early 2020, Dave Rubin published his first book. Now, with a title like Don't Burn This Book, there might be a question on your mind. Fire? Psych. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Unless, of course, that fire is my mixtape.
Part of the idea of titling the book Don't Burn This Book was that I didn't expect us to be in 1941 Germany where we're literally, doing bonfires, throwing books into fires. But as you said, why do you burn books? Well, it's because you don't want those ideas to be heard.
Well, right now there's a massive coordinated assault on my Amazon reviews and some of the online retailers to
suppress the reviews of the book, not because they've read the book or they're countering the ideas, but just because they don't want these ideas heard.
So that, I would say, is a digital or a modern book burning.
So I have read this thing twice. So let's just get this out there. This book is terrible. There are many things I could say about this book. I could go on for several hours. So I'm just gonna cover a few of the main things. If this video gets to 10,000 views, I will do a live stream going through the book and all my notes on it. Oh God, it's gonna be like 12 hours long. So when you look at the back side of this here, there's a whole bunch of praise for Dave Rubin, a whole bunch of quotes from different people. Dr. Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Eckhart Tolle, Peter Thiel, Tucker Carlson, and Larry King. One of these things is not like the others. Okay, first warning flag going up here. When you read the quotes on the back, only one of them actually acknowledges the content in the book. And that's the quote from Jordan Peterson. The others don't actually acknowledge what's in the book. I don't think they read it. Broadly speaking, this book doesn't actually provide you with anything. That's my biggest problem. It's kind of empty and vapid. And pretty much everything in it is the exact same material you get from watching the Rubin Report. It's pretty much just a bunch of his interviews and shows just repeated in the book, which is a little disappointing. Dave, if I wanted to watch your show, I'd watch your show. This is not your show. This is a book. I would expect something a little different. I expect your ideas to be a little more robust. That kind of leads into the other big point. None of the content of this book, none of its ideas are going to get it burned. I know, with a title like that, you're kind of expecting a little more, right? You're expecting something kind of inflammatory. You look at this and you think, don't burn this book. Oh man. Oh, I bet Nazis are gonna hate this book, right? There's gonna be some good stuff in here, right? Maybe I'm gonna learn about some of the Jewish sciences, like the theory of relativity. Yeah. Maybe I'm gonna learn about Das Kapital. Oh yeah, that's a good one. Some Karl Marx stuff. Maybe I'm gonna learn about the early research into transgender people. Oh, that's fun. No, nothing like that. No one's gonna burn this book. Actually, that's not true. Dave Rubin burned this book. I guess with the title like this, he was kind of hoping and begging someone to do it, and nobody did, so he did it himself. There's not really much of an action plan or anything else. The main theme of this book is, I'm Dave Rubin, and I wrote a book. It's a self-congratulatory, conservative circle jerk. That's pretty much the only thing you're going to get out of it. But to be fair, there was one part of this book that I thought was okay. It was the only chapter I found marginally interesting. Chapter 9, Find a Mentor. This chapter is pretty much just Dave talking about when he first went on tour with Dr. Jordan Peterson. Wild as it is for me to say this, it was actually kind of interesting and insightful to read. If the whole book were about his experiences going on tour, that might actually be a decent book. I mean, there's still bullshit in this chapter, make no mistake. For example, Jordan Peterson is as well-read, intellectually curious, and academically rigorous as I can possibly imagine anyone to be. Well, that sounds like a problem with your own imagination, but I've already done a video on Jordan Peterson. Don't watch it. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's get to the meat, I guess. The beef or the soy protein. I don't know what we want to call it. I don't know which joke we want to make there. There are a number of things in this book that really kind of jump out at you. For example, there's a part of this book where Dave Rubin talks about certain issues facing this country. Rubin has clearly not hired an editor for this, because it kind of goes into two separate chapters. Think freely or die, and check your facts, not your privilege. He tries to frame the second chapter as him providing different resources and different research and different data points to back up certain claims of his, but it's like, that really should have been in the previous chapter. This should be one chapter, don't you think? Anyway, among these issues, a few kind of stick out, like, I don't have a colorful metaphor. Trans issues. When I was a boy, I wanted to be a Decepticon named Soundwave. Dave, I thought you were a comedian. Why are you using the one joke? Now that's exactly how we know he's taking trans rights mega seriously. He's stealing the only joke conservatives know about trans people. But this next one, I don't understand where he got this one from. He tries to talk about foreign policy in this section. When it comes to foreign policy, we need a strong military, period. Okay, but let's look at an example he gives to justify this. The point is, if we don't assert ourselves in the face of tyranny, who will? It certainly won't be international alliances like NATO. Just look at what happened to Ukraine. It gave up its nukes to become a NATO country, which guarantees protection to all subscribed nations if attacked. But when Russia invaded Crimea, Ukraine got zero support. The country gave up its most potent weapons for a signed bit of paper, which meant absolutely nothing. Think Ukraine regrets that now? If you're not aware, Ukraine has never been a member of NATO. I don't know where Dave Rubin got that idea from. You want a real history lesson here? After the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Ukraine sold the Soviet nuclear weapons to Russia. Ukraine never had a nuclear program and never had the capacity to even use these weapons. The Soviets did, but the Soviet Union no longer existed. Also, at the time, there was international concern that if Ukraine tried to utilize these or tried to gain control over them, then there would be immediate retaliation from Russia and or NATO. It's just colossally stupid. Here's another one though, from the chapter, Don't Worry, You're Not a Nazi. This one is bizarre. So he tries to say, in obvious pandering again, to his conservative readers, congratulations, I have fantastic news. You are not a Nazi. Thank you, Dave. As if that was ever in doubt. Let's look at the evidence. And the justifications he gives are astounding. Exhibit A. I'm guessing you're no fan of socialism, which was a founding principle of the Nazi movement. The name Nazi is an acronym for the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which most of today's Democrat socialists conveniently forget. Actually, that's an understatement. These people don't just overlook the truth, they've totally rewritten history on the matter. These days, Nazism gets associated with conservatism at the drop of a hat. But historically, it stems from the left. Adolf Hitler, an art-loving vegetarian who seized power by wooing voters away from Germany's Social Democrat and Communist parties. Every part of that is wrong. No, it did not stem from the left. So let's just say the obvious thing. Hitler seized power because he was appointed, not because he wooed voters away. Yeah, what Dave won't tell you is that actually it was the Conservative and Center Party who joined the Nazis in voting for the Enabling Act after the Reichstag fire. This gave Hitler essentially unlimited emergency powers. The Social Democrat Party were the only ones to vote against it, as the Communists had already been banned from voting in the Reichstag. Now in the early days, there was a wing of the Nazi Party, which was a little more economically left-wing. We call them Strasserites. They were all murdered. Yay! This is also ignoring the fact that left-wing people were the first to go. The saying goes, first they came for the communists. Well, let's just ignore that, right? And this is hilarious because earlier in the chapter he says, see, we live in strange times, very strange times, an era in which people secretly hope you are a Nazi, because then at least they'd have a real villain to rage against. Unfortunately for them, supply doesn't meet demand, so they frequently turn to political gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation that makes its targets second-guess themselves. That's literally what you're fucking doing, though. This is literally like 2 paragraphs apart from each other. I really don't understand how someone can write and just lack self-awareness like this. I am astounded. But that's not all. Let's give his other reasons. Exhibit B. Real Nazis hated gays and Jews to the point of mass extermination of them in purpose-built death camps, so it's pretty unlikely I would suddenly be their go-to choice for a bedtime reading, even if this is a page-turner. Okay, Maybe. But let's hear the next point, yeah? Exhibit C. You've just paid about $20. Actually, it was about $4. I got this book used at Goodwill. To learn my take on classical liberalism, an ideology that, if fashionable back in 1930s Germany, might have stopped the Third Reich before it even started. Hair in my mouth. See, classical liberals oppose judging people based on their ethnicity or religion. They only judge the individual. I'm sorry, you say you're classically liberal and you don't want to judge based on ethnicity or religion, but in the previous point, you're doing just that. How does that work? Astounding. All right, let's skip around a little bit. There's also a point where he does 1350. Yeah. That being said, it's still not racist to observe that half the homicides in America are committed by and against African Americans. There may be countless reasons behind this, and I truly wish things were different, but it's a fact. This is not racist. If anything, it's racist to ignore this and make the task of finding a solution even more difficult. Okay, so he said there may be countless reasons behind it, but he doesn't give a single one. So he just brings this up and then moves on to the next topic. Like, what the hell, man? Saying that the data exists may not be racist. You are correct. However, just bringing it up and not following through on it is kind of fucking weird. Just imagine you're at a party. Hey, did you catch the game last night? Oh yeah, it was pretty sick. Yeah, did you know that half the homicides in America are committed by black people? See, that'd be kind of weird, don't you think? Now hold on, Dave. I know you're watching. I'm not calling you racist. I'm just saying that's kind of weird to write out. It's progressive activists who are banning people from having bank accounts, speaking at universities, and from social media platforms and crowdfunding sites. They have huge influence over the media and the political lobby. Their modus operandi has chilling parallels to the tactics seen in 1940s Germany, which is also technically cultural appropriation. No kidding. They've literally taken the horrific, archaic ideas of the past and imported them into the here and now. This is true cultural appropriation, not whether you have dreadlocks or hoop earrings. So unironically, he's doing the whole, they infiltrated our institutions thing. They have huge influences over all the media. The same thing as cultural Bolshevism, I may add. And the whole chapter is about, well, my point? The left's non-stop, casual use of the term Nazi to shame, defame, and besmirch is so indiscriminate, so scattergut, and so preposterous that you're almost duty-bound to disregard it. But the previous paragraph, you were calling the left Nazis and saying that they're culturally appropriating from the historical Nazi party of Germany. So Dave, do you, think about what you're writing? Each paragraph is supposed to kind of flow from the previous one. Did you just spew all of this out and not put any thought into it? I am astounded. Let's talk climate change. Yay! Or as he labels it, environmental issues. I have to say, this section is not just wrong, it's obviously horribly wrong. In fact, my notes say, bad, wrong, holy shit, dude. Disclaimer, I am not denying that global warming is real or that human beings aren't a contributing factor. I'm no scientist, so I'm inclined to believe what experts tell us. That said, I'm also a big fan of rational thinking. And a sane middle ground. So when certain members of Congress declare we'll all be dead in 12 years, I prefer to reassure myself with the following. Then he talks about some random Stanford University professor saying we'll run out of food in the 1960s. Okay, I don't care. And then he talks about extreme weather. The world's death rate from extreme weather is lower than it's been in any decade since 1900, according to the Reason Foundation. From 1920 to 1929, there were 241 deaths a year per million people, but that figure reduced to 5.4 deaths per million between 2000 and 2010. This includes deaths by everything from hurricanes to floods and extreme temperatures. Dave, how do I say this nicely? This is not a rebuttal. Less deaths due to extreme weather is because we have better technology than we did in the 1920s. We have radar. We have warning systems for extreme weather. We know when a hurricane is gonna hit so we can evacuate. We have helicopters to pull people out. We have the invention of air conditioning. How do you think that that is a good argument? The only case in which this would be a good argument is if you had a senator or something saying, oh yeah, we're probably all gonna die from extreme weather, and then you bring that up as a rebuttal, but you didn't, because I'm willing to bet there aren't any senators who've said that. That's also disregarding the financial cost it takes to like evacuate entire cities when a hurricane is coming, and the financial cost of having to rebuild and repair things at an even higher rate. But I gotta say, like, the worst thing is the last one. Remember, these are facts he uses to back up his claims about environmental issues. Polar bears. If you saw Al Gore's documentary, An Inconvenient Truth, then you'll be pleased to know the global polar bear population has actually increased since the 1960s. Interestingly, Al never mentions how he sold his failed TV network, Current TV, to Al Jazeera, the state-owned Qatari propaganda channel, for $500 million. Oh, and Qatar is one of the biggest oil exporters in the world. Strange, wouldn't you say? It is strange how you keep talking about Muslim nations, Dave. According to Danish environmentalist Bjorn Lomborg, I am so sorry, the greatest threat to polar bears comes from hunters, who shoot between 300 and 500 of them every year, not global warming. Why should I care about polar bear population? Inconvenient truth? What are you talking about, Dave? Okay, polar bears. Congratulations, you found one nice cherry-picked example. I really can't even understand how someone's brain would think that this is like a proper counter-argument, but let me give a real counter-argument. Let's talk about the mass extinction event going on. I don't know if you've heard this, but if you look at it, it's actually apocalyptic. We're currently living through a mass extinction event known as the Holocene extinction. We are losing animal species at a loss of 100 to 1,000 times the normal background rate. Oh, but don't worry, the polar bear population is increasing. This is something that, is unavoidably catastrophic. This is something that humanity is probably going to need a solution to. There's also a chapter, Stop Hating Straight White Men, America and Western Values. Don't take your rights for granted, is a subsection. He tries to say the United States is good, okay, but he tries to do this in a really shitty way. First of all, we're not an imperialist country. The United States of America was literally founded on pushback against imperialism, which is defined as a policy of extending a country's power and influence through colonization, use of military force, or other means. How is that not the United States? That doesn't mean we're always perfect. There's no doubt we've made some big mistakes as administrations have changed. For example, most of us now view George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq in 2003 as a massive blunder, escalating into a war that cost thousands of Iraqi lives and millions of American dollars. But wait, you just said we weren't imperialist, and then you described us being imperialist. Like I said, he can't even get through a few pages without forgetting what he already wrote. This aside, much of our foreign military intervention has been good. Just look at Korea, Vietnam, and both world wars, where our contributions secured much needed freedoms. Dog, if you want to talk about American foreign policy being good, don't cite Vietnam. What is wrong with you? Funny, he doesn't even mention Afghanistan here. None of these infamous battle sites are now satellite American states that we've colonized. Hint, they would be if we were imperialists. That's not what fucking imperialism is. Literally the definition of imperialism, which you gave, is extending a country's power and influence. It says, through colonization, use of military force, or other means. Yeah, okay, we didn't set them up as American colonies. This literally goes against the criteria you laid out at the beginning of this section. I don't know, man. I don't know, man. One more bizarre thing. I know I'm like just making fun of him for like clearly not putting a lot of effort into like editing this and like proofreading it, but there's one really bad thing that stands out. Okay, chapter 8, learn how to spot fake news. Maybe this is valuable, right? Instead of just like actual fake news, he mainly talks about bias in liberal media. All right, still, let's hear him out. But get this, don't take my word for it though. Let's look back at 3 of the biggest media hit jobs carried out in the past few years. First one, we all remember the Covington scandal of January 2019. This event saw a group of Kentucky high school students wrongfully accused of racially harassing an elderly Native American, Nathan Phillips. Okay, yes, you are correct. Those snot-nosed kids in MAGA hats, weren't actually antagonizing him. Personally, I would have not covered that story because I think we should leave kids out of these things. Example number 2. The same month as the Covington fiasco, the media found another case that was just too good to be true, as they always are. This time it was a hate crime against gay black actor Jesse Smallett, who told police he'd been attacked outside his Chicago apartment by 2 men shouting, "This is MAGA country," who then tied a noose around his neck and poured bleach on his skin. Dave Rubin is also correct about this story. Investigation determined it didn't happen. Now, example number 3. These 2 cases, Covington and Smallett, were both unfolding at the same time as the Russian collusion theory, a drama that ran for 2 years, largely thanks to MSNBC's Rachel Maddow, who was desperate to convince her viewers of election rigging with the Kremlin. She, like many of her media cohorts, ran countless hours of coverage on the conspiracy theory that Donald Trump had somehow stolen the 2016 election with help from Russian officials, every day about a new theory, a new email exposed, a new secret meeting taking place. Skipping ahead a little bit. Sure, virtually everything they reported about regarding Mueller's hashtag Russiagate and Smollett's hate hoax turned out to be false, but apparently that's just reporters doing their job. One of these things is not like the other. It's the Mueller investigation. The Mueller investigation resulted in charges against 34 people and 3 companies. So far, there's been 8 guilty pleas and 1 conviction. So, that's not fake news. Now, you want to say Rachel Maddow overstepped things, okay, I'll give you that. But you want to lump all this in together? Nuh-uh. Ironically here, Dave, you're the fake news. How about that? Charges were filed against 5 Trump campaign members. You might remember Paul Manafort, Michael Flynn, Michael Cohen. Yeah. Or the charges against them fake news. But you see, Rubin doesn't mention any of that because he wants to control the narrative. He doesn't really want you to know about this. He just wants you to think, oh, it's all fake news. Or rather, that's what he thinks, so that's what you think. Okay. So that's the 3rd example, right? The 4th example, I had this conversation recently with my father, who's been a loyal subscriber to the New York Times for more than 3 decades and is finally considering scrapping his subscription. Ugh. After the newspaper did a hatchet job on me in a cover story titled, "The Making of a YouTube Radical." In it, journalist Kevin Roos cites a young man, Caleb Cain. Caleb Cain is also known as Faraday Speaks, who watches conservative YouTube content and suddenly flirts with neo-Nazism. The June 2019 article, which included a montage of YouTubers on the front page, blamed me, plus a host of others, including podcast host Joe Rogan and commentator Philip DeFranco, for radicalizing a generation into disliking women, gays, and blacks. You know the drill. He goes on for a few pages here complaining about this and talking about his tweets to the author. Kind of weird to put that in a book, I think. And to cap it all off, these 3 examples combined, which are just a drop in the bucket, help explain why trust in mainstream media is an all-time low. So, Dave, that was 4 examples you gave. He said, I'm going to give 3 examples. He gave 4, and then he said, these 3 examples show why. So what I'm guessing happened was, in an earlier draft of the book, he wrote about 3 examples. But then later in the year, the New York Times article that included him came out, and he was really mad. So he said, I'm going to have to write a few pages about this. Then he wrote a few pages, and then he just never went back to edit the rest of the chapter. Amazing. But now, to top it all off, let me read one final quote about fake news. So now that you know these types of fake news, test what you see against this checklist and consume it with a fresh perspective. Curating a list of trusted journalists will also help. This doesn't have to be static. It can change over time, but you'll want people who generally operate in good faith. To ensure this is their motive, check their output. Does it always reach the same conclusion? Does their criticism only flow in one direction? If so, take a step back. Reporters should be conduits for information, not manipulators of it. Dave, that describes you. I love it. I love it. I don't know how you can have zero self-awareness, but I am so glad I read the whole book through, because that is an amazing quote and an amazing way to finish talking about this book.